All right, so we have the data model, right, the Java data model, and we have the repository. Now, for the repositories, typically the convention is that for every Java class, there will be a SQL table, right, that we want to store, right? We want to store those Java instances, and for every table there will be a dedicated repository, right? So there will be for every table, for every Java class, there will be a dedicated repository. So, for instance, there will be a repository for the modules, for the courses, for every single class. There will be a different table, and each table will have its own repository, right? Now, this repository needs to be used from within your actual code. So your code needs to use these repositories to talk to the database. So let's see. For the most part, we've been our implementation in Java has to be our extent of implementing things in Java had been in the context of implementing web services. All right, so let's see how we can access data from our web services. All right, so for instance, here's a really simple endpoint, right? That creates the endpoint that allows you to retrieve users if you give them a user ID. Okay. We know that, right? It's a get mapping. We have a path variable, parses the path parameter from the URL, and maps it to a local integer. Okay. So here it is. So notice in the last line here, we are using that repository which we declared earlier, right? And then we're using one of its default out of the box finder methods, right? Notice it says find by ID. See that? So this find by ID it comes out of the box, right? It's implemented by the JPA. You don't have to do anything. It's for free. So notice that it has a generic name. It says find by ID. So this is not specific to the user. It's not specific to any particular class or any particular table. That's why it has such a generic name, find by ID. It also comes back with also a generic response. Right, it comes back with an object that is smart enough to deal with nulls, right? That maybe no records came back, right? That match. There are no users with that ID, for instance, right? So to deal with the fact that this might be null, right? And to be able to deal with this, right? They wrap it inside of another object that is called an optional object, right? It's a class called optional. That basically just wraps the result inside of this bigger object, this meta object, and then you can query and say, is it null? Is it even there? Did something come back, right? And if it says yes, you can just retrieve the actual value, right? To retrieve the value, you do a dot get. So basically, the find by ID returns this optional object, right? And then you can retrieve the object by saying dot get, and then it comes back as the actual object in this case. Which it knows that it's of type user because if that's configured. It was configured to CRUD users, right, with this primary key. Make sense? Here's another mapping from inside the REST controller. And we're using we're going to be using the find. Oh no, I'm sorry. This was just we're going to retrieve all the users. So in here we're mapping it to API/users, and the implementation is that we use a repository, and it has another generic object, the find all function, right, inside of the CRUD that's already implemented out of the box. You don't have to implement this for yourselves. It's implemented out of the box, and also it returns a generic object, right, which you need to cast to the specific type of your object. In this case, it's a list of user, right? And then it can be returned right? Notice that the conversion of this, converting to a JSON object and an array object of JSON object, that's still in place, right? That doesn't change. So the same thing that applied from what we talked about last time we met, that still applies, right? That doesn't change. That still works as advertised. Here's the here's using the username, implementing another endpoint, but this one is using the one we implemented, right? The one that we implemented using the repository. We declare the find by username. This is just checking to see. This one's actually being able to deal with both the username or not providing a username. So, for instance, the reason is that these are all dirty. The reason is that what we talked about last time we met is that we are using RESTful services, and RESTful services has a specific syntax on how we build those RESTful URLs, right? For instance, if we're looking for users, right? We say users. If we don't say anything, that returns all the users, right? And if we want a specific user, you would then provide maybe a unique identifier, and that returns that specific user. Correct? Now, in this case, we are trying to retrieve a user by something other than its unique identifier. Even though username is a unique identifier, here it's not the primary key, right? So you cannot do this, right? Where you can just hear Alice, because this URL pattern is already taken, right? It already maps to something that takes an integer, not a string. Okay. Also, it's not proper RESTful, right? In REST, right, it's always the entity and the ID, entity, ID, right? So that's the syntax. Whenever you want to be able to filter by some other property, right? For instance, the username, we would filter by using the query string. We would say query, and then whatever we want to filter. In this case, is say the username, right? We could say username, right, and then say Alice. Okay. So this example here is considering this option, right? Why? Notice that all by itself, this is mapped to find all users. Okay. But I want to use that URL, that same URL pattern, but to be able to retrieve somebody who has a particular username, or salary, or role, or whatever, how we want to filter it. Yes. So this same URL pattern is actually being used for two things that are different, that have different logic, right? And there's no way for the controller to use this as a distinction of saying, run this function if it has the query string, or run this other function if it doesn't have the query string. There's no way to map it. Okay. So basically, we're using the same API endpoint /API/users, right? But here we have I've added a request param. We added a request param that is going to retrieve this particular parameter, username, this request parameter, and it's also required false. See that? Required false. So meaning it's okay if this is not even there. It's okay if you don't put required false. It'll complain. It'll say, "Oh, I tried to find a username, but it's not there." Right? It'll throw an exception. So anyway, so once I have the username or not, right? There's some code here saying, well, if it's not null, then it means you want to retrieve that user with the username. Right? If it is null, that means you must want all of them. Yes? Okay. So it says if it's not null, use it to query the find user by username. Notice there's no need for casting because that one already returns a list of users. Oh, that's why I used a list of users, because that's what it returns, a list of users. Otherwise, it just returns find all. Okay. Excellent.